Okay, we're going to get started right on time this afternoon. Halt, Louise Quest, Margot Hill. Greetings, my name is Margot Hill. In our tribal language, we say good day, friends. So I want to welcome all of you to our first webinar. We are going to offer a number of webinars throughout the upcoming months. We are very pleased to welcome you all to our webinar. We want to thank our partners at the Washington Traffic Safety Commission for providing us support in our projects here at Eastern Washington University. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the projects and things that we're working on here. My name is Margot Hill, and I'm assistant professor here at Urban and Regional Planning, and I'm the director of the Tribal Planning Program. Also joining me is Jennifer Mesa. She's one of our graduates from our planning program, and she will be sharing a little bit of information as we move forward. So I come at traffic safety from a number of different areas. My first lifetime, I served as a tribal attorney. I've been a tribal court judge. So I've had the opportunity to prosecute DUIs and keep people that choose to drink and drive off the road. Also, unfortunately, I've sat on the bench and sentenced those folks to jail time if they kept returning to our court systems. So here at Eastern Washington University, we have a tribal planning program and have a whole range of projects that we work on. We also have a tribal CERTCOM for small urban regional transportation program. Unfortunately, we no longer have Northwest TTAP, and we really miss our partners that were here with us, but we want to continue our work with tribes and providing technical assistance. So we are doing our best to continue to work with tribes and provide these series of webinars. So we'll have about one webinar a month. And it'll range from data collection to crash data analysis. We'll be working with our federal partners, and they'll be joining us. We have experts in the field that are willing to join in our webinars, and we'll look at strategic planning for traffic safety committees, as well as traffic safety toolkits. So there's a whole range of things. We'll be looking at tribal law and order codes. So we invite you to be on notice for a calendar of webinars that we'll be offering. In our language, we say stemas pu'us, which means what is in your heart. So we'd like you to participate in our webinar. If you have questions, we'll do our best to make sure we're watching the chat. We are pleased to continue to working with tribes across the state on our projects. And we'd like to hear from you what experiences you're having. This is a new technology for us. So we're trying to work out the bugs. We've got IT on the line to help us. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to just go through a couple of slides. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but the slides I do have are to model how you might do a tribal traffic safety presentation. Please go ahead, Jennifer. Just look through them. So some of you have a tribal traffic safety committee. Others of you are looking at developing a tribal traffic safety committee. So here in the beginning, some of our information many of you may have heard or be familiar with, but we wanted to include it for tribes who have not had the opportunity to develop a tribal traffic safety committee on their reservation. So when we have a presentation, of course, we begin with introductions. We talk about Target Zero. We talk about data on a national level, on a state level, and then we provide specific tribal data for that individual tribe. We encourage you to continue to do data-driven planning and to know what your numbers are, and then present that to tribal council and your traffic safety committee as you move forward through the data analysis. Often in our tribal planning programs, we have our students compare county data with individual tribal data. It shows parity. It kind of gives a perspective on where tribes are situated as far as crash fatalities and serious injuries. We have developed a model here at Eastern Washington University that has the whole spectrum of tribal programs that will work with traffic safety. So we'll talk to you a little bit about that. The important part of the model is that it represents all the people that are involved with traffic safety. It's not just transportation individuals. It's tribal court, it's tribal council, it's EMS, it's law enforcement, it's health and human services, the behavioral health aspect. It really takes everybody working together to work towards traffic safety, particularly if we're talking about impaired driving or any kind of behavioral issues. We need folks across the tribal program spectrum to participate in the Traffic Safety Committee. Often in our tribal programs, we are very short-staffed, and we are working in silos, so we're focused on our projects. I just came back from Affiliated Tribes and Northwest Indians. We had a conference in Portland, and we had on the main agenda the opioid crisis. Tribes are very interested in how we can work to slow the opioid crisis in our tribal communities. And again, one of the issues consistently for strategic planning on the opioid crisis was communication across all programs. When you have programs that are not talking to each other, they're not even aware of what each program is doing and what services they offer and so forth. So let's go ahead and move into some of our next steps. Again, we advocate for data-driven planning and actions. So often we work with the tribal planners to make sure that we have the data for each team. So we'll talk a little bit as we go through the different projects that we have been doing here at Eastern Washington University, the meetings with tribes to develop the Tribal Traffic Safety Committees, the mapping projects, and then again, the data analysis. We always begin with Target Zero. We think it's an excellent framework for tribes to look at the national data, the state data, and what the teams across the region are doing to reduce fatalities on reservation roads. We will also give you some specific data from the Yakima Nation and look at what some of the activities of their Tribal Traffic Safety Committee. So our slides are a little bit out of order, but let's go ahead and move to so again, when you are doing a presentation for your tribal council or your traffic safety committee, you can give them the data. We know as transportation planners and tribal folks that we are getting killed at 3 to 5 times the rate of all American citizens. For a whole range of reasons, we know that we continue to have behavioral issues like drinking and driving and not wearing our seatbelt. So sometimes the fatalities are 7 times the national average for other groups. When you're presenting to your tribal council and tribal traffic safety group, you want to show a spectrum from, say, one period of time to another, 2008 to 2012. You're comparing it to other nationalities and other groups. You're looking at American Indian fatalities on reservations or off reservations may be the case. Go ahead, next slide. So again, when you're talking about fatalities and serious injuries, you want to talk about specific issues that are facing your tribe. Here in this slide, we have the fatality rates for the Washington state population, and we're looking at total number of fatalities for each race. Again, American Indians and Alaska Natives have higher fatality and serious injury rates for speeding, for pedestrian issues, for impaired driving, and lack of seatbelt use. We always look at, of course, we're funded by Washington Traffic Safety Commission, and we start with some of our Washington state data. So looking at some of the data here in Washington state, we see, of course, that not wearing our seatbelt is a big issue. as well as pedestrians. On some of our reservations, the land tenure, the ownership of the land really affects the fatalities and the types of fatalities that we're having. For example, on the Yakima Indian Reservation, which we'll specifically talk about today, there is a large number of pedestrian fatalities. And we know in Indian country that we have a lot of jurisdictional issues. Who's maintaining the roads, who has ownership, who's monitoring traffic safety issues on those roadways. Go ahead, please. So we know that federal law requires each state to have traffic safety planning for all of its jurisdictions, including tribes. So states are required to work with tribes. And here in Washington State, we have a very good model and work well with our state partners on traffic safety. Again, the state works really hard to incorporate tribes into their Target Zero plan, and there's an advisory committee that identifies tribal issues and looks specifically at tribal data. So again, we're pleased to work with the Washington Traffic Safety Commission and develop goals and kind of projects for the different tribes. Next slide, please, Jennifer. In this day and age, we know that state laws are changing with our behavior. Recently, the state passed a law for no texting and driving. We are seeing on our reservation roads a large number of people that are getting into accidents due to texting and driving. In some reservations, we don't even have good service for our cell phones, but still we continue to have a number of people crashing for texting and driving. Here in Washington State, of course, we passed a law to make that illegal. So hopefully we will get some data on that and maybe a reduction in fatalities for those issues. Next slide. In our project, we like to work with the 4 E's. As transportation planners, we are all familiar, that's education, enforcement, emergency medical services, engineering, but we also include leadership. We feel that tribal council is very important in providing direction to our tribal traffic safety committees. So education, across all of our tribes, we are finding that tribes are working hard to provide good information to their community. We see it a lot on Facebook. We see some articles in tribal newspapers. At the Colville tribe, there's been some good articles about specific issues with traffic fatalities and how it's impacted the community. Enforcement, we want to work with law enforcement to provide a data-driven analysis and really help law enforcement pinpoint locations. And actually, a lot of tribal law enforcement have maps right in their police headquarters that identify each location of where fatalities and crashes are. So law enforcement is on top of it, but we want to work to have better data systems so we can provide planning for those areas. Emergency medical systems, of course, all of our tribes, medical services, all of our tribes are constantly working to have good volunteers and good employees to provide EMS services to the reservation. When we did our first phase of our project, we found about half of the tribes we were working with were contracting EMS with local communities, the local county, let's say. And about half of the tribes that were more rural in nature, the Spokane tribe or the Colville tribe, actually provided their own EMS services. So every tribe's a little bit different in that aspect. Of course, engineering, we know we have topography issues and other design flaws in our road systems. We don't have shoulders because of ownership and having some of those safety built into our roadways is just not always available on our reservation roads. Again, as I mentioned, we have added leadership to the 4 E's because we feel that tribal council plays a significant role. They pass the law and order codes, they approve the budgets, they give direction to law enforcement. Yes, we want drug dealers off the reservation. They give direction to generally to judges saying, hey, we want to deal with drinking and driving on the reservation. So tribal council really set the policy and the agenda. Next slide, please. So our Target Zero priorities are a little different in Indian country. Target Zero lays out the priorities that they have across the state of Washington, whether it's impaired driver or run off the road or speeding involved. And then they have other priorities that are at a lower level, of course, unrestrained vehicle occupant, and unlicensed driver issues. In Indian country, our Target Zero priorities are a little bit different. We continue to have impaired driver issues like across the state, but we also have a significant number of people that are not wearing their seatbelts, that are speeding, and we also have a higher level of pedestrian issues in Indian country, and primarily because of the jurisdiction issues. Next slide, please, Jennifer. So when you're looking at a culture of safety, we want our tribal folks and our state folks even to really think, what does a culture of safety mean to you? What does it mean to your tribal community, to your neighborhood, where you live? Even thinking about tribal aspects, you might think of how you can say some of these words in your language. At the Salish Kootenai tribe in Montana, they will have anti-drug slogans in their tribal language. Meth, it just has a more emphasis when it's your tribal culture that's saying these things to you. It said meth is bad or evil. You can use your tribal culture and language to emphasize some of your values and some of the things that you're wanting for your tribe. Next slide, please, Jennifer. So we know that many of our tribes are facing similar issues. We have a shortage of police officers, of law enforcement. At the Caldwell tribe, we know that some of the law enforcement gets hired away to state patrol or to the county. All of our tribes have issues dealing with having adequate treatment facilities. Do we have enough facilities available for our tribal members when they're ready to go to treatment? A number of tribes have issues regarding adequate jail facilities. They often maybe contract with the county, or their jails are not up to code. So it just depends on a whole range of things. Also, probation officers, sometimes we need more people helping to track our folks that might be drinking and driving as they work their way through the system. But we all have a number of very different transportation issues. If you're on the Muckleshoot Indian Reservation, you're looking at State Route 164, the corridor that you have between downtown, the city of Auburn, up to the reservation, the safety issues, people walking on those roads, maybe moms with strollers. On the Caldwell Indian Reservation, due to the large number of fires they had a couple of years ago, they are dealing with extreme mudslides. Scott Waller and I were just up at Nispelem at the Caldwell Tribal Headquarters a couple of weeks ago, and we were we couldn't even imagine that the transportation issues that their public safety team are dealing with. The mudslides are taking out highways, and that means that some tribal communities don't even have access and are having difficulty just getting kids to school. So really there are some serious public safety and transportation issues at the Caldwell Reservation. If you're the Spokane tribe, maybe it's the new casino in Airway Heights, and you're dealing with roundabout issues. And the Yakima Nation, they're dealing with a whole range of safety issues for their pedestrians. And again, all tribes are a little bit different when they're looking at their safety policies. Some tribes choose to adopt state codes, the Washington traffic codes, or some tribes have their own laws. So it depends on each tribe whether your seatbelt is primary or secondary. So whether your law enforcement is actually stopping you if you're not wearing your seatbelt. Every tribe is a sovereign nation, so they can formulate their tribal codes any way they choose. Some tribes do not report DUIs to the state, which jeopardizes their licenses. We understand that tribes are often concerned about employment, so they don't report them. On the other hand, there's tribes like Lummi tribe that if you continue to get DUIs on the reservation, we're going to report it to the state. First, we try to help our people within our own systems. We're providing consequences through law enforcement and tribal court. And because they're our own tribal members, we want to get them to treatment. So we're working with our behavioral health staff and our probation officers to get them into treatment and to have some kind of aftercare. Again, all tribes are struggling with aftercare. I know the Lummi Nation was looking at trying to have some kind of aftercare, how to help our tribal members once they come home from treatment. So there's a whole range of issues that we're dealing with. For law enforcement, do you have taverns on your reservation? Are you dealing with folks that are drinking and driving after closing time? So you have some more focused patrols in specific locations. Some tribes don't have taverns on the reservation, but maybe a bordering town just off the reservation. At the Spokane tribe, we have Springdale, where we will have people coming back after closing time on reservation roads. So you're thinking about all these policy implications when you're looking at where drugs and alcohol is being served, if it's drunk driving, or where you have high crashes on the reservation. These are all things that you're thinking about. When you're looking at overall tribal policies, you're also thinking about whether the tribe is requiring a driver's license, a whole range of things. Does your tribe have access to the breathalyzers in the field, or the anti-lock, once you've been prosecuted for drinking and driving, the interlock systems for your car? There's the whole range of things that tribes are thinking about that would like to institute but maybe don't have access. And again, as I mentioned, some tribes operate their own EMT program, while others really contract that out to local county. Next slide, please. So just to get, we wanted to specifically talk about working with tribal traffic safety committees and how to present that as part of your tribal planning process and protocol. So when you're working with a specific tribe, we recommend that you reach out to the transportation planner or the director of planning and discuss your project. You reach out them maybe through email, understanding that the tribal planners are responsible for everything. Tribal planners, we know you guys have to do economic development, any construction, and you have multiple land bases within your jurisdiction. So you want to basically introduce yourself to the planner by email and follow up with a phone call to discuss your project. Basically, what's your objectives or what will it entail? Next, you want to talk to your planning department about setting up a meeting with tribal council. Ask your planners who they think should be present. Do you want the chief of police there, behavioral health, EMS? When we first met with a number of tribes, we actually invited the chief of police to come and join us. At the Spokane tribe, the chief of police was available to join us, and so he joined us from the very first meeting, which is really important to get buy-in. Law enforcement is an important aspect of traffic safety, and so you want them at the table at the very beginning. At the Yakima Nation, as we began to do our presentation, tribal council actually called over the chief of police to join us. So it depends on each specific tribe who you want at the table, and I would ask your planning department who you think should be there. We did a whole range of different presentations. Sometimes we presented to the traffic safety group, the Tribal Traffic Safety Committee. Other times we did presentations to a specific department, for example, behavioral health. Jennifer and I did a number of presentations to the Tribal Behavioral Health Program, and we started with the whole range of drug and alcohol counselors, DCFS, the Children and Family Services. Everybody participated in the room. The same with the Cabo tribe. We also did a separate presentation for behavioral health. So you will work with every tribe a little bit differently. If you want to work, set up your meeting with tribal council, you'll often contact their secretary. If it's a small tribal council, you will just get on the tribal council's agenda. For example, the Spokane tribe, we only have 5 tribal councilmen. However, if it's a larger tribe, let's say it's the Colville tribe, you will have, a whole range of 14 members that you might deal with. So it might be an informal process of getting on their agenda, or it might be a very formalized process. So we have, Jennifer had some screenshots. They were a little bit out of order, but I would like to go back to some of the screenshots that shows you some of the documents that we have from the Colville tribe. Just for an example, if you want to get on the committee's agenda, you may put in a request to get on a particular committee's agenda. Your planning department will tell you, should you get on the community development committee, or maybe you'll be on the law and order committee or law and justice. And so there's a number of committees with a very formalized process. Here on the screen you can see, I think that's the agenda from the Community Development Committee. It will tell you which tribal council will be present. It'll tell you what time the meeting is starting, and then where you are at in the agenda. On this particular agenda, I was set for the 11 o'clock time. Plan to get there early and be ready to present. We always encourage you to bring both a digital and a hard copy. If you're going to a tribal location that is not necessarily set up for a digital presentation, it's nice to have a hard copy as a backup. So next we have agenda application, or I think you want to go to that one, agenda application. Okay, so the agenda application. So if you're communicating with the secretary, please pay attention to deadlines. On this particular agenda application format, you can see that there's a specific deadline in which you need to get your materials in to the secretary, and she will provide them to the appropriate committee. This example is for the Education Employment Committee. It's asking, what is your topic? How long will you take? An estimate, who the contact information is. And then that's real important for some tribal councils. Here we have the Colville tribe. Is your topic just for discussion, or are you asking for a specific action? So you will indicate, we're just discussing the topic, we're just introducing it, or you have a specific action that you're asking for. It also has room for where you would indicate, yes, we have a PowerPoint, so that they know that they need to have the right technical support and electronics available, as well as any supporting documents or people that you should have in the room. Go ahead, go back to that next slide, please. It's very important that if you are asking for a specific action from a tribal council, that you have prepared a recommendation sheet. When you go to tribal council, they are very busy. You don't want to waste their time, and it's nice if you have prepared information for them. So at the Spokane tribe, I may have a resolution. It's not too presumptuous of me. We know that traffic safety is very important to all tribes, and tribal council, they are often on board. They want to reduce the fatalities and serious injuries on their reservation roads. They know this is a very important issue. So they put you on the agenda, they pay attention, they want to hear the data. So they're willing to take action in most cases. However, you need to be prepared with the exact language that you would propose for a tribal council resolution. If you are having a recommendation sheet, and you can see that on the right of your screen, it has the specific committee's name. In our case, it was the Community Development Committee. What are you asking of them? You will have to have the exact language that you want to have for your Target Zero Tribal Traffic Safety Committee. You are asking them, would they like to participate and create a traffic safety committee? So you will want your action, your recommendation sheet or your resolution to specifically name the programs that you would like to have participate in a tribal traffic safety committee. For example, Tribal Council is requesting that EMS, that law enforcement, that behavioral health, all participate in these traffic safety committees. So it's key in this part that Tribal Council is requesting them to participate. Then we know that it's elevated to the point of Tribal Council, and Tribal Council is setting a clear policy direction that they want a traffic safety committee, that this is important to them and they value this, and this set, the set of programs working together across program lines to create a traffic safety committee. But when it's Tribal Council designating them and asking them, it's much more important. So we recommend, of course, a resolution or a recommendation sheet, and have those filled out ahead of time. Make sure that you've talked to the folks that work for Tribal Council, their secretaries, you have the right forms, and then your specific ask. What are you asking of Tribal Council? Next slide, please. So we'll move forward back to our specific discussion. Again, we have our tribal traffic safety model that we've developed here at Eastern Washington University, because we know that it takes everybody in our tribe to work towards tribal traffic safety. Of course, as I mentioned, Tribal Council is at the top. They are working to develop policies. They amend tribal law and order codes and approve them. Is your seatbelt going to be primary or secondary? That's a decision that will be passed and approved by Tribal Council. Whose budgets are being funded? Do we often, like we've seen at the Colville tribe, we need more drug and alcohol counselors on staff. Sometimes this means that the youth drug and alcohol counselors are doing assessments that are needed for the adult tribal members. So we need to make sure that Tribal Council is aware of some of our budgeting issues, which of course they are. As you work yourself around the model, law enforcement, tribal law enforcement, they are often working with other jurisdictions to deal with non-members that are coming onto our reservation. It can be very difficult. Sometimes tribes have cross-deputization agreements that really try to work out some of those issues before they happen. For example, in Airway Heights, we have both the Kalispel tribe operating a facility as well as the Spokane tribe. They are working with local county officials to deal with any issues that they might have on those off-reservation locations. And of course, as well, when we have non-members on our reservation committing crimes, we have to work with the local county, and we work with the local sheriff to provide consequences to those folks. A whole range of issues for tribal law enforcement, whether it's working with jail facilities or identifying hot spots for impaired driving. Again, we're working across the program. So we have tribal planning working with all of the departments, looking at demographics, any issues that might be coming up for transportation. Specifically engineering. Many of our tribes live in some of the poorest counties across the state. If we have Ferry County or Okanagan County, there's often not resources available to fix our roadways. So we're responsible, we're working with BIA and our federal partners to make sure we have good striping, the painting's done, rumble strips, things that are providing more safety signage, some easy countermeasures that we can really enact to make our roads more safe. Tribal court systems. In a future webinar, we will specifically drill down on tribal law and order codes, but tribal court systems are very important to our traffic safety. It deals with tribal member behavioral choices. If people are speeding, law enforcement is stopping them and they're getting ticketed. If they're driving impaired, then law enforcement and tribal courts are getting those people into the system. They're providing consequences and, of course, treatment, which leads us to our behavioral health, our health and human services. These are some of the shortest staffed folks across our tribal communities. We need more drug and alcohol counselors, chemical dependency counselors, and we're hoping that our tribal members are going to colleges and getting those certifications, because we really want our communities to have healthy behaviors. And so it's important that our behavioral health have access to treatment facilities. Once we've provided assessments, drug and alcohol assessments, we want to make sure they have access to treatment. And then once our tribal members finish treatment, once they return home, aftercare is a big issue that continues to be mentioned across the tribes. You know, at AT&I, there were numerous tribes that were taught, Swinomish, Lummi, talking about aftercare issues. EMS, again, our Indian Health Service provide us local health care, but our EMS staff is working with local hospitals and outpatient, you know, medical facilities to get our tribal members, once they've been involved in a serious injury or fatality in some type of crash, get them to a hospital as quickly as possible. So that's really an important communication factor from our EMS programs to the local hospitals, and all of our tribes are working hard on that. Then, of course, tribal transportation, engineering, as I've mentioned, maintenance and operation, and a whole range of construction issues. At the center of our model, as we've mentioned in the past, is tribal member behavioral choices. We know that it's primarily behavioral as some of our issues when it comes to tribal traffic safety. Our tribal members continue to walk on the road with dark clothing or not walking in the correct direction. Also, we have a number of tribal members that are not wearing their seatbelts. While we've been working out at the tribal communities, we've seen a number of tribal employees not wearing their seatbelt. So that's an issue. Is tribal council, our tribal policies mandating that our tribal employees wear their seatbelt? So a whole range of issues, speeding, and of course, impaired driving. We have a significant population that drink and drive, and we've got to make some changes to reduce some of the impaired driving, serious injuries, and fatality crashes. Next slide, please. So I'm going to let Jennifer talk a little bit about the work that she's been doing at the Yakima Nation. Jennifer Mesa is one of our graduates of our planning program, and she's been doing a little bit of work with the Yakima Nation. I'll let her talk about that.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So with the Yakima Nation and also with the Spokane Tribe and the Colville Reservation, we did a preliminary study on crash fatalities. So crash fatalities and serious injury crashes. And here you can see some of the maps that were initially developed. This was done by the first group of students that entered the program in 2015, 2016. So basically, when we map out the information here, the data tells us exactly where the locations are happening, the frequency, and the types of crashes. So this is one of the first maps that we developed. This is all the crashes that occurred in the Yakima Nation from 2010 to 2014. From there, we looked at the minor injury crashes. So it's spread across the reservation, serious injury crashes, and fatal crashes. So after reviewing these, after reviewing the initial information on types of crashes, we looked at the preliminary crash data, and we just dug a little bit deeper to see what these crashes are. And we looked to see how we can identify the contributing crash factors so they could be emphasized by the traffic safety committees to improve safety specifically in the Yakima Nation. So after reviewing this data, we drilled down and found that the top 5 contributing crash causes. And for the Yakima Nation, we found it was lane departure and objects. So this is drivers leaving the road and departing from their lane and crashing into physical objects. Intersections, so drivers entering intersections at road angles, pedestrians and pedicyclists. So here, this varies between drivers crashing directly into pedestrians, going straight on the roads at intersections and driveways. The fourth was overturned vehicles. So here, this involved drivers speeding and losing control of their vehicles. And the fifth is earth banks or ledges, so drivers speeding with no guardrail present and crashing into roadway ditches. So our research assessed the top contributing crash factors and facilities with repeated crash locations. And basically this analysis helps tribal leaders and the Traffic Safety Committee to identify collision types, repeated crash locations, high-risk facilities, and crash factors that have the greatest opportunities to improve traffic safety and reduce fatalities and serious injuries. In addition, we also did a comparison to see how the Tribal Target Zero matches this specific nation. So the fatalities and serious injuries demonstrated a high risk to the roadways, and to successfully implement a Target Zero for, in this case, the Yakama Nation, we looked and advised the Traffic Safety Committee that to prioritize specific needs from the crash data and tailor the needs to their Target Zero. So in this case, we found that, for example, pedestrians and pedicyclists had the highest fatality rates. So that should be first on their list. Entering at angle, intersection crashes, and the object crashes. So with every reservation, I think it'll be very different how their Target Zero needs will be met. But the crash data here lets us see exactly what it is that the Yakama Nation's Tribal Traffic Safety Committee should be looking into, looking at my notes at the same time. So we provided an additional report on exactly how these contributing crash factors can be met. So we looked at providing short-term and long-term countermeasures. So for example, for lane departure crashes, we looked at the behavioral aspects that were that we saw that influenced a lot of these, that overlapped with these crashes. So for example, lane departure crashes and fixed objects crashes, we found that 51% of the crashes involved drivers under the influence of alcohol. So even though we have engineering, we have countermeasures, there still has to be other expertise within the Traffic Safety Committee to look into addressing the driving under the influence. Additionally, 50% of the drivers were exceeding speed limits. So here is where we could involve tribal law. We could address tribal planning to reduce speeding. Another data set that we found was 9% of the drivers were distracted. So this also comes under the behavioral choices. So we see here that even though we've located these contributing crash factors, there still needs to be other expertise at the table who can address the behavioral aspects. In addition, we provided short-term and long-term countermeasures. So for example, for lane departure crashes, there's improving pavement friction also helps, rumble strips, enhancing delineation along horizontal curves, nighttime visibility. So these are all countermeasures that the Traffic Safety Committee can look into and hopefully reduce fatal and serious injury crashes. I'm just going to provide some other examples. With pedestrians and pedicyclists, we found that there was a high fatality for this specific group. And the data here demonstrates that there wasn't a lot of we didn't find a lot of drivers that had been driving under the influence. So here we looked at nighttime visibility. We're looking at the roadways that are primarily used by pedestrians and pedicyclists. We're looking at speeding, and we're also looking at driver behavioral choices and granting right-of-way to pedestrians and to pedicyclists. For overturned vehicle crashes, these crashes overlap with high-risk behaviors, such as speeding, changing lanes without precaution, making turns in risky areas. Other contributing factors we found also that there were drivers that had been driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, exceeded speed limits, or distracted driving. So again, all of these crash factors really have to be addressed with other members from the tribal traffic safety committees, and also from tribal leaders such as law enforcement, planning, courts, health and social services, and in addition, planning. So basically, in conclusion, the collected crash data that we analyzed from 2010 to 2014 revealed that there's a need to address a specific crash factors such as pedestrians and also behavioral choices around the Yakama Nation. So the next steps that we're working to address are road safety audits, crash sites, identify short-term and long-term and effective countermeasures, which the Tribal Traffic Safety Committee can address with the Tribal Council. Our aim is to provide information for tribal planning structure, so creating the traffic safety committees, strategic planning specifically for the traffic safety committee. So with the Yakama Nation, with the Colville, and with the Spokane tribe, we've engaged in strategic planning. So we present the information of the data, we present the crash locations, the contributing causes, and we plan out a strategic plan on how we can go through what would be the next steps to reducing fatalities and serious injuries on reservations. In addition to this, we aim to provide information on road inventory, on crash data. So with the data here, we can see what are the causes, how they're occurring, what's the behavior around the crash fatalities, and the contributing crash factors. And from there, we aim to provide this information in either help with writing, with mapping out exactly where these locations occur. So mapping the crash data with GIS, identifying priorities and greatest opportunities to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, and developing crash data analysis reporting. And then from there, we aim to provide planning and design for construction. So this entails developing the road safety audits or systemic transportation analysis, and including these projects, these priorities, this crash data into the tribal transportation improvement programs, also transportation safety reports, and apply to grants, and hopefully get some funding for the nations and the reservations, and then implement that into construction. And once we have these projects into construction, our aim is to have the traffic safety committees report back to the tribal council for review. So continuously have the tribal traffic safety committees meet with tribal council on a quarterly basis, report on a yearly basis on the advances, and how these projects have aligned, and what the data tells us a year or two after they've been implemented. So thank you very much. I'm gonna have Margot come back out here.
Thank you, Jennifer. So Jennifer has kind of outlined some steps that we are hoping just to support their tribes in their different activities as they kind of work their way through tribal traffic safety and planning, and actually implementing the projects. We have a couple more slides here, but it just kind of identifies the different areas of the model. I won't go into in depth on them, but for your traffic safety committee, you can continue to consider each of these bullets in how to move forward in looking at your code changes, code provisions. We have been working to develop a website in which we will put up some model codes. If you're looking at law and order codes, and we'll discuss this in a future webinar, but these are a few of the issues that code sections that you can think about when you're reviewing your law and order code. As I mentioned before, about half of the tribes, Lummi, Spokane, Swinomish, Yakama, have formulated their own code language, where some tribes have adopted the Washington codes for traffic safety by reference maybe in whole or part, like the Colville tribe or the Kalispel tribe. So when you're thinking about code analysis, you're thinking about safety belt use. There's still some gaps across the tribal codes in alcohol and drug reporting and penalties. How we're dealing with some of those gaps in codes differ across the tribal nations. It is very difficult because of jurisdictional issues when you're looking at the complexity of tribal state speed limit laws because of road ownership issues and enforcement and so forth. We continue to have questions of jurisdiction, and we will continue to have those issues in Indian country, whether it's civil and criminal traffic safety enforcement, who has cross-jurisdictional agreements, and how we work with our local counties to deal with some of those enforcement issues. So this slide kind of represents the whole range of jurisdictional issues that we have and why it is so important to have relationships with our state agencies and our local counties. Some counties are excellent to work with, some are a bit more difficult to work with, knowing that we're all short-staffed and short funding, but we can have intergovernmental cooperative agreements that deals with regulatory issues, administrative issues, and provides a little bit of judicial clarity when it comes to traffic safety issues. Also, cross-deputization agreements. We can work with law enforcement. That's very important with our local counties and jurisdictions, as well as having MOAs or MOUs with our EMS. Most tribes that have gaming have, of course, through their compacting process, worked out some of these MOAs and MOUs with the local counties and jurisdictions. But this slide just shows that, ownership is an issue, rights of way, who's liable for maintenance of those roads, the type of road issues, and then, of course, civil and criminal jurisdiction. We know that there's a lot of stressors on our law enforcement. The tribes spend tens of thousands of dollars sending our tribal members or folks down to FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, to return home to the reservation. Some tribes have opted to provide or to have agreements with their folks. After they've made the investment, you agree to work with us for a year or work with us for 2 years before you seek employment elsewhere. But we know with these large land-based tribes, it's very difficult to get spatially to get from one district to another or one end of a reservation to another, or if we're contacting our local county sheriff, that we have to maybe wait up to an hour sometimes to work when we're transporting non-tribal folks. So manpower, again, continues to be an issue. We're going to finish up. We have a few more slides there that indicate some of our tribal core actors and our EMS systems and some of the issues that we have with drug and alcohol treatment. We will go ahead and get ready to open up for chat if you guys have some specific issues. At the end of this slideshow, we have provided some best practices. Throughout the last 4 years, we've been working with tribes across the state of Washington and trying to identify some specific problem areas and then some best practices. So we give you some example for leadership. We have the Lummi Business Council. For education, we have the NUCSAC. Again, education, we have the Lummi Tribe working under DUI issues with high school students. Enforcement, we have some examples from the Lummi Tribe. And so we try to provide a few best practices that you can read at your leisure. We'll go ahead and open the chat because we're about running out of time here. We just wanted to allocate about an hour. This was our first webinar in our series. And we'd love to hear if any of you guys have some, maybe some specific issues that you'd like to discuss. Okay, I'm not seeing any. I don't know if you guys have any examples of some new projects that you're working on, or maybe some discussion about how your tribal traffic safety team is working. I know we have Gina Graham on from the Colville tribe, as well as a number of participants from the Muckleshoot tribe. Each tribe will formulate its own committee in a manner that works best for that tribe. The emphasis that we've had when we're discussing these issues with tribes, that you include people from all the programs. Sometimes there's difficulties once you've had folks get in the system for, let's say, a DUI, impaired driving, that they need to be tracked through probation, and they need the appropriate resources to get into treatment. So there's a whole range of issues that we have when we're dealing with impaired drivers. It's important that we have this traffic safety committee that can provide some kind of the best responses. Again, I'm not seeing any specific questions come up.
Scott Waller's asking, what would be your recommended very first step to develop a traffic safety?
Okay, so the very first step, kind of going back to our beginning steps, you want to brainstorm with your transportation planner or your director of planning, and ask them who in your tribe are some go-to figures, some key players. Typically we call them stakeholders, and some specific names. And we did a number of on-the-ground interviews, working with EMS and fire departments, and kind of identifying issues for each specific tribe.
Luis is asking, I was wondering, how is the checkpoint process working with that tribe?
Are you talking about a checkpoint to stop drunk drivers? If that's the case, checkpoints are illegal in Washington state. However, tribes are sovereign governments, and you can have checkpoints, although if you're dealing with non-Indians, your local county prosecutor is not going to want to deal with that troubling issue. Washington state law hasn't agreed to checkpoints as something they want to endorse. Although some tribes, I believe it was maybe Squaxin Island or so, they were looking into trying to have some checkpoints available. But right now, today, tribes aren't typically doing it because you would have to work with your local county sheriff, and they don't want to participate if that's illegal at the state level. Okay, we're going to unmute a few of our participants. So again, this is the first time that we've used this technology, so we're working on making the process a little bit more easy. There's a question from the Colville tribe. What happens when you stop a non-member? Can they claim that their rights are being violated? Well, it depends on your law and order code, and jurisdiction. Civil jurisdiction is a difficult issue. Whether your law and order code allows for stopping of non-members, that's your tribe's sovereign jurisdiction. It depends on how your code reads, and it's different across the state. I don't think we've had a lot of people claiming that their rights have been violated. Although we encourage tribes to treat all folks as they continue to deal with non-members with respect. Again, some tribes, their officers are cross-commissioned, or we have cross-deputization. So non-members coming through the reservation will fully expect to be stopped by tribal law enforcement. So it just depends if you've worked out that cross-deputization. It is, in fact, possible. Hello? Jennifer is referring to the Yakima Nation, and we've had a lot of success working on the Yakima Nation and some of the projects the committee is doing. They have a whole range of activities that I just wanted to share a little bit. When it's back to school time, the tribe usually comes together, and maybe it's tribal credit that provides backpacks and school supplies to the kids. Well, the Tribal Traffic Safety Committee also gets involved, and they might have a fluorescent clip that goes on the back of the backpack, or some kind of reflector that's kind of a fun add-in to the backpack. So when kids are walking, they're more visible because they've got that reflector or kind of clip that glows, or some kind of light. So that's one example where a traffic safety committee is working across programs with innovative solutions. The Yakima tribe has been doing a number of projects. When they have their Yakima Treaty Days, not only is tribal transit there with a table, they also have the traffic safety committee, providing information to tribal members about wearing their seatbelt. When they have the tribal parade, there's participation from the traffic safety committee, really doing that education piece. That's really important in our tribal communities, that we let people know that we care about traffic safety, we care about you, we want you wearing your seatbelt, we want you slowing down, and of course we don't want you drinking and driving on the roadways. So that's about our time. Tribes are continuing to deal with issues of traffic safety. At the Centennial Accord, one of the big issues for tribes was the opioid crisis. Unfortunately, we know a number of people do not have access to the opioids are turning to heroin. So we continue to have drug issues on our roadways and in our communities, and that goes for all communities, not just tribal communities. Mainstream America is dealing with the opioid crisis. AT&I, Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, is working towards a drug summit this summer, so we will keep you on notice of that, because it directly affects our safety of our roadways. And so we will let tribes know about that. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us for our webinar. In the future, we will also have some of our federal or state partners join with us to provide you information and give you some examples. We hope you found some of the information that we provided you today, knowing that some tribes are kind of informal in their meeting process, where other tribes, larger tribes, have a more formalized committee process. We hope this helps you navigate some of the tribal meeting and setting agenda systems. And as you set up your traffic safety committee, we are here to provide you any technical support. Jennifer kind of will walk through how you do some mapping and data analysis, and we will continue to be working on some of those projects and providing webinars here for you. So again, thank you for joining us on the webinar, and we'll see you next time.